Barbarians have been slaughtering people, but the obvious counter is shields. Let me show you. Maybe I do have the time. There are some classes which will retain an advantage against you no matter what loadout you use, but my god, are shields effective against barbarians. The game is not without its glitches, however, and we should probably talk about the recent changes they've made to the whole game, especially barbarians. What? I've been seeing a lot of complaints about the most recent patch. People are allowed to voice their opinions, and at least some of these complaints are valid. I thought about starting the video with footage of other content creators' vids just to emphasize my point here, but we'll avoid that and focus on the complaints themselves. Firstly, the most common, potentially valid complaint I've heard is that the loot in the stash is now worthless. This is likely to be more true for some than others. For example, I have been hoarding minerals like ruby silver and froststone, and that stuff has largely kept a great deal of its value, if not increased in market value. Others, unfortunately for them, have been focusing on uniques, artifacts, and just having as high a percentage of legendary gear taking up the space in their stash as they could manage. I hear you. A change like this might have been better at Wipe, but the dev team made the obvious point that in order for these changes and their associated problems to feel as good as possible for next Wipe, the band-aid simply had to be ripped off all at once as soon as possible. It's really no secret that the player count tends to increase, at least briefly, right after a wipe, so that should be the target. Nowadays, it's not just feasible, but likely that a delve to Inferno with a Squire kit will result in every single item on your character being replaced by something that improves your performance in some way. I'd like you to consider that for a moment. Gear fear still exists, but instead of being tied to the things you brought in, you can fear directly for the gear you've acquired in the past 20 to 30 minutes as you battle your foes in the epic setting that is the maw of hell itself. Furthermore, being spawn rushed feels much less penalizing and rewarding for those who do it. Even if it happens on the lower levels, the expressman has likely taken much of your value to the surface. In other words, climactic, high-stakes fighting still exists, but there's going to be a lot less pain associated with dying, especially dying early after spawning in. I don't think people realize just how much more attractive this makes the entire game, especially to new players. Gear fear and high stakes have always been important, but it hasn't gone away. It's just been moved, softened, and improved to make way for a larger audience that maybe doesn't want to risk hours and hours of grinding every time they go in just to have a fighting chance. It's not as though you can't still risk a whole bunch of gear if you want to, though. In High Roller especially, I've seen plenty of folks running around with kits that, even after the changes, still cost thousands of gold pieces on the marketplace and improve the performance of their given class greatly. Does the game still need work, balancing, and an inch-thick layer of polish? Yeah, absolutely. The extreme nerf to plate mail, in particular, seems absurd to me, especially given that plate mail seems to cause you to swing harder, and in the case of the dexterity from heavy gauntlets, actually swing faster. Things are broken. The game is still in early access, and it's absolutely the norm for one or two classes to experience a rather large advantage, especially in solo play. Warlocks need a mechanic to punish them for repeatedly casting the same spell or curse over and over again. Druids need a penalty to casting stats when they shift repeatedly or spend too much time outside of human form. Barbarians actually feel pretty balanced to me, though they are filling up the kill feed. One thing I will say is that the only proper counter to barbarians is a shield, and shields are unpopular. The Bardiche, in particular, has a problem with shields that many weapons have. Their hitbox is generated all at once when they start the active portion of their swing, and the second Bardiche strike is a stab. All stabs, be they from spears, rapiers, rondel daggers, or even the second attack of the Bardiche combo, have the ability to pierce shields as a result of this unpolished hitbox problem. The fact that these stabs are the only time shields feel truly difficult to take advantage of, however, is a testament to how well the melee mechanics of the game do work, despite what many content creators might tell you. It's also true that it's very difficult to protect your legs from any attack while using a shield. I imagine the fix to this would be to reduce the amount of damage dealt to a victim when they're struck in the legs, while at the same time increasing the on-hit slowdown effect one receives from being struck in the legs. It also bothers me that, much like bard buffs, this on-hit slowdown debuff is completely binary, when it would clearly benefit a great deal from being what other games have called a fading snare, which, simply put, means that the buff or debuff is applied with great strength and then smoothly and quickly evaporates over the duration of the buff or debuff, rather than disappearing all at once when the timer ends. You could argue for much stronger, more efficacious bard buffs, for example, if they only held full strength for the first 30 seconds of the 4-minute duration, while at the same time doing virtually nothing at all for the last, 90 seconds to 120 seconds. Currently, the bard meta of buffing oneself into godhood feels very un-bard-like. The point I'm trying to make here is that the game is still in its very early phases, and we should be encouraging the devs to test radically different ways of balancing the game. And wouldn't you know it, having all gear exist at roughly the same stat level makes balancing the game a great deal simpler. Are barbarians too strong? Change some of the barbarian stats or weapons, or maybe change the armor value for everyone else so they resist more. If you've been paying attention to the minutiae in the character details screen, you may have noticed that several updates ago they added damage type descriptors to every weapon in the game. They are now slashing, piercing, or blunt damage. Though this currently goes unimplemented, having no effect on damage, it is still true that blunt weapons in general have native armor penetration attached to them. This signals to me that in the future, armor values may be transformed completely, with some items giving more resistance to slashing and piercing, while likely few armors will be allowed to resist blunt damage very well. The most popular and apparently fair version of the game for a long time was the 25 to 124 gear score lobby. Now, the entire game feels roughly like those lobbies did, with players having just enough room in their build to try new things freely, But the ability for new players to try different things is now no longer a huge risk or even a medium-sized one, but rather an enticing, easily obtained opportunity. Want to try a high dexterity version of Bonk Wizard? Go for it. Want to try a ranger who's built for resourcefulness, trading every other stat for a larger quiver size? Go nuts.
Shoot from afar. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, get out of here!
Nice.
Some people want to say that the game is dead, but combat is more lively than it has ever been. Every time I die, even before the patch, I would think to myself, what could I have done differently to win? Nowadays, I feel like I actually have answers to that question. I don't find myself combing through my killer's gear in spectate mode trying to find the secret power he had that defeated me. Rather, I feel motivated to just try harder and do better. In short, this patch brings me so much joy that it makes me feel like singing. Arrows from rangers and whiskers on kittens, copper light armor and warm cobalt mittens, silver white lantern shields make me the king. These are a few of my favorite things. Green-colored slimies and crisp riposte stabbing, cursed bells and floor spikes and clerics with healing, wild tinnies fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. When the bear bites, when the rogue stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad.